video sports, so any kind of new sport or a reinvention of a traditional sport that's enabled by video. Up with me on the panel, they're all going to do their own intros, but we have Marty, who was involved with the drone company. We have Jason next to him, who is involved with the fan-controlled football league. And then at the end, we have Josh, whose company is also involved in drone racing and is enabling all new gaming from that. So I'll let you guys take it from there.
Hi everybody, I'm Marty Wetherall. I'm with a company called Hydra FPV. FPV stands for First Person View, which is how drone racing happens, with first person view cameras on the drones. The pilots fly that way. We're based in Minneapolis. We're figuring out the entertainment side of drone racing. And I have a quick video just to show what we're doing there now, which is drone races with tiny little drones indoors at bars. We can't really be outside this time of year in Minnesota, so we're racing drones indoors, and this is what it looks like.
Hi, my name is Jason Chilton, and the company I work for is launching the Fan-Controlled Football League, which is going to be the world's first professional sports league where the fans are actually in control of the teams and make all the decisions from drafting the players to calling the plays and everything else. And the video you're about to see kind of explains that concept, and it shows some video from 2017 when we had a team in the indoor football league called the Salt Lake Screaming Eagles that were the world's first fan-controlled professional sports team.
And folks, every single play this game was called by the fans. This is the future of sports.
Hi, my name is Josh Ingram. I'm actually local to the area, very close to Austin. I have a company, Flynoceros, and very similar to Marty, we do FPV drones. We're trying to expand that into ways of playing games with drones. And this is just a little video. If you're not familiar with FPV, this will give you a sense for what people in our sport do.
thing I wanted to address is the name of the panel, Live Action Video Sports, a Real World Comeback. The reason why we went with that is because in our view, video enables sports to come to life. So for a while we just had traditional sports, run of the mill. Then we had the rise of esports, which was way more like digital gaming, video games. With videos and the high-tech technology that's coming up, we can kind of combine them and almost make sports either create completely new ones because of video and technology, or we can liven up traditional sports in a way that we never had before. So I'm going to turn right over to Marty, and I want you to kind of chat about that.
Yeah, so my background is actually in film and TV. And now I'm involved in this drone racing entertainment company, and what really intrigued me about that is that you have, I think, the first sport with video built into it. As you can see from that first-person view FPV flying footage, the pilots, and you can see in our video the goggles that the pilots were wearing. The pilots wear goggles, they port themselves onto the drone. They're not looking at the drone up in the sky, trying to pilot it old RC style. They're actually shifting their consciousness onto the drone through the video camera there. You can't fly the way that these racers fly without being right there. They can't fly at those speeds and go in and out of these obstacles without knowing that left is left and right is right, being perfectly situated. So you've got a sport that wouldn't be possible without the video camera baked into the equipment. And so what we're doing in Minneapolis right now is we're rolling into these bars and tap rooms, and we're producing a live stream of a live sporting event, but we don't bring a camera crew because the cameras are baked into the equipment. And so we have drones and phones, because our phones are little mini production, units as well. So we're taking this event and porting it out to the world. We put it up on the screens at the bars. We also put it out to YouTube, Facebook, and Twitch, and we don't have cameras on tripods. So to me, that's fascinating. It is a sport that wouldn't have existed without video technology. We're figuring out the entertainment implications of that, the engagement implications. What is the visual language of this sport? All the sports that we've grown up watching have figured out what the optimal way to watch on TV is. Football maybe being the most telegenic of all the sports, but even they're evolving a little bit. So to your point, Jen, this is a new sport that's been made possible by putting video cameras on drones, and all of a sudden you've got a racing sport. I can pass it over to...
Yeah, I want to just say that all of the people on my panel have new sports, and you'll hear from the next panelist that he's reinventing a traditional sport, but at the end of the day, they're completely new sports. So when we were talking in our discussions before the panel, we labeled it V sports, not E sports, it's not traditional sports, but we think it'd be cool to call it V sports, because really these are completely new sports that are coming out of video technology. So talk about the fan-controlled football.
Yeah, absolutely. The concept of letting fans have control of a team is something that we've been tremendously excited about. Our founders kind of all independently arrived at some version of that idea, all got introduced to each other and said, hey, let's pool our resources and make this happen. But when it comes down to specifically making decisions and having control over what's going on the field, obviously streaming video and the immediacy of seeing what's happened and knowing what needs to happen on the next play, we couldn't do what we do without that streaming video. And so we were very fortunate to get partnered about a third of the way through our first season, got partnered with Twitch, who streamed all of our games, and it was just amazing how what an experience it was for the Twitch viewers to be on there, and we actually integrated it to where you could call plays through the Twitch chat itself. So it was a great early example of what I think is going to be one big wave of the future is embedding interactivity into your streaming sports experience. And we kept seeing these things happen in the Twitch chat, people would find out that their friends were watching a game. Oh, what's this? Okay, they go over to this channel. They'd come in, and we had these great drone shots. A lot of shots that weren't your traditional football broadcast shots. And invariably, we would see this happen in the chat. Somebody'd come in, they'd watch for a second, and say, "Oh, these graphics are awesome!" And then like, "No, dude, it's an actual game. You tell the players what to do, and they'll do it." They're like, "Oh, you're full of expletive deleted." Like, "No, watch, no, call play." And like, okay, the next play is going to be a deep post, and they throw a deep post, and they're like, "Oh, that's awesome!" So, we talk about that convergence of traditional sports and esports with that level of interactivity. That was, that's one of the things that's most exciting to us about that concept, and the immediacy of streaming video makes it all possible.
Yeah, and people have called what they're doing real world Madden?
Yeah, real life Madden or real world Madden. That's one of the that's one of the analogies that tends to come up. And we've actually got there's a big group of Madden players, esports Madden players on Twitch, and they're really excited about this concept, and they're excited to kind of put their play calling and strategy abilities to the test in telling actual players what to do. Now they've gotten a lot of experience in telling virtual players what to do.
Cool, and then speaking of real sports, well, not really real sports, but Flynoceros has been likened what they're doing to Quidditch from Harry Potter. So talk about what you guys are doing.
Yeah, it's actually really interesting. I mean, Marty touched on racing, especially with the tiny ones, which is really fun in a social setting. But what you don't see a lot in FPV is that social aspect to it, because a lot of times you're out in a random field, and this is really the new age nerds who are doing this, and they're the ones who kind of started this. It's a really new thing that's really picked up in the last 5 years, just because of technology, cameras, accelerometers, some new chips that we see in phones are being repurposed for drones. Now we're out in the fields and we're racing, and that's really great. But there's not really an audience base for that. I mean, there is. I think we can see it on the smaller levels, but we actually have something. I think we can explore a lot more with it. I think we can turn it into a real sport, and we can bring it into ball sports similar to other professional sports like football and basketball and things like that. And so what I've been focusing on a lot is actually, how do we take drones, create, teamwork, so people working together, and then we take an object like a ball and we play with it. And so now you're not playing on a two-dimensional field, you're actually playing on a three-dimensional field. And I think that everyone can resonate with Harry Potter and Quidditch as an example. And when you take FPV and you put yourself in that cockpit and you become the person in the drone, it immediately makes that link. And then you take somebody who's a fan who wants to watch this, and they actually get to interact with it from that perspective. That's just really exciting. And I think there's a lot of potential there, and a lot of future sports that are going to come out of that. And I think it's really interesting just to kind of tie in these things, is you take football, which is a sport that's been around for a long time, and we're seeing these modern developments into it to take it into this new kind of V sports idea. And we're taking new sports like drones, and we're kind of converging towards the middle, right? We're converging the same way to use technology to engage the fans, to engage the players, to bring it all into kind of a modern day version of V sports.
And one of the things that you see a lot nowadays is just trying to get fans involved. And we've seen that a lot with virtual reality and people putting people in the center of the stadium or on the court. So with first person, especially with first person view, and then what you guys are doing as well, how are you guys engaging the fans in a way that really is an innovative way that they've never been able to do before video existed?
The one thing we talk about, so again, the pilots that are in these races that we're putting on are they're flying using the video feed that's coming into their goggles. But that video feed is not exclusive to them. So if fans come and they bring their own goggles, they can tune into the same channel and they can see exactly what the racer is seeing. They're just not actually controlling. And then we're taking that same feed and we're putting it up on the screen. But other sports, I think, have gotten close to that. I think, a dashboard camera in a racing car, or maybe the helmet cams and things like that you might see emerging now. The camera technology, is getting smaller and lighter. But with FPV sports, you've got the ability to see exactly what the participant's seeing. And so we're just beginning to figure out what is the potential of that. how much of that is the right amount to show. You may have seen the Drone Racing League on ESPN. They build these elaborate sets and they've got these custom drones that they fly. I think they've had 2 seasons on ESPN now. And it's been interesting just looking from season 1 to season 2, how much are they relying on the first person view footage? I mean, it feels like you're flying, but how much of that is the right amount for the perfect engagement, the perfect spectator experience? So we're figuring those things out, but just being able to see exactly what participants see is a sea change moment, I think.
And what's interesting to me is I'm an adrenaline junkie personally, so I like that you chose action sports for this, because in my view, all of these are action sports. Like, they're adrenaline pumping, you're in the actual action in a way that you aren't when you're spectating, you're making those calls in real time. So either way, I just feel like it is action sports, because you're getting the fans so engaged that their heart is jumping out of their chest.
Yeah, we really feel like, it's a new way to experience, football or, any sport that you would kind of put into this fan-controlled paradigm. And, we saw, a lot of excitement about the fact that the fans themselves, the viewers, are actually controlling, to some degree the action by calling the plays. They don't literally control the players' movements, but they decide, okay, this is what play we're running next. And, we were excited at how well it worked out from a results standpoint. Our team, an expansion team with a rookie QB who'd come in as our backup, ended up being he was the rookie of the year in the IFL, and we were the 3rd ranked offense in the IFL with fans calling all the plays. So like the actual direct control is really cool, but one of the other things that I mentioned before, some of the different angles and things that you'd see through our drone cameras and different things that we would do, people really got excited about that. They're like, I want to watch football this way, and we'd be getting this real-time feedback in the Twitch chat. No, I want more drone. Don't give me this overhead. Give me the drone shot. And so we were trying to in real time kind of adjust. And I think, Marty, like you were saying, there's a learning process of what works for most fans. And I think we'll get to a point where fans can have a lot of control over the way that they experience a given sport, from camera angles to saying I want to go from here to here to here. And we've been kind of talked about as real life Madden, and one of the things we want to do is be able to say, since the fans will call both the offense and the defense, and we'll know what the plays are before the plays run, be able to digitally demonstrate on the field in the stream, here's the play that's coming, like you see your view in Madden with the pass patterns laid out. Okay, here's what the offense is doing, here's what the defense is doing, so fans can say, ooh, I bet this is the part of the field to watch for this play, and then hopefully get to a point where you'd say, well, I would like to watch this now through the helmet camera of this receiver, because I think this will be where the action is.
I think what's really interesting, just to tag on to that, is real life Madden is something that you had football, and then slowly video games developed, and now we're merging them together. Something that's interesting with FPV, kind of the analogy to that is soon after drones became something you raced, we developed simulators, and these simulators are as close to realistic as possible. And something that I find really interesting is this idea that your players can actually go home, play Madden, practice plays, and say, this one works really well. And then go back to the next game and say, I'm going to try this set of plays because it worked in the game. This is going to work in real life. And just tying that back to FPV, we just saw with the DRL tryouts, one of the top guys that qualified for DRL has never even flown a drone. Did all of his practice in a simulator. And so you see this this crossover and analogy between playing e-games and then participating in the actual sports that we're creating. And I think that tie-in for fans is something that I don't even think we can fathom right now, how real that makes it for these people.
Yeah, I just want to put a finer point on that. So the Drone Racing League has a simulator that you can download that is extremely analogous to what flying one of their drones is like. And they have a whole tournament sponsored by Swatch to find anybody that can get to that simulator. If you become one of the best simulator pilots, you can try out for the real tour. And they just had those tryouts, I think it was Super Bowl weekend. And one of the guys we fly with in Minneapolis was one of the top qualifiers, and I think he came in third. But he was there, and the guy who won was some guy from nowhere, from the middle of nowhere. He had never flown one of their drones before. He had only flown the sim. When he won, it's like the old movie The Last Starfighter, where they, like this kid was really good at video games and the aliens came and recruited him to be a real starfighter pilot. Like, that's what this is. And so this guy had only played the video game, he won, like he crushed, and then they gave him one of these DRL custom-built drones because in like a month he had to go fly it in a real race. And our guy in Minneapolis heard or saw the videos he posted. That's the other cool thing, you can post videos of all the stuff you're flying, you're doing with a drone because it's video built in. But he said this guy's doing stuff that nobody's ever done. And it's because he learned in a whole different way. He learned in the sim. And he's doing things that none of the other guys on tour. So it'll be really interesting to see the start of the season. Like, is this guy that came purely out of the simulator, is he gonna like all of a sudden be the best pilot, from just learning a totally different way? So it's a really interesting story, I think.
Yeah, I believe with the DRL2, last year's winner from the simulator ended up either winning or doing super well in the actual drone tournaments. So that leads into what I think is really cool about a lot of the topic is that in a sense it democratizes sports in general, whereas previously you had to do maybe Pop Warner football and then play in high school and get recruited for college and then get recruited. Here there is a slight barrier in that it's a little expensive to get involved, but once you're involved, sports are expensive to get involved with too in a sense, but once you're involved, anybody around the world can do it. You could host global tryouts, and do you see it that way?
It's as accessible as video games in terms of physical ability, right? There's no advantage to being however you are, as long as you can control, drones are piloted with a double joystick controller. And so it's as equal in terms of access as that. And yeah, if you can just get to either a simulator or the equipment is not that expensive, relatively speaking, to get in on it. It's cheaper and safer than racing cars or something like that, right? So yeah, I definitely believe it democratizes in a way that we haven't seen before, just because video travels. Video is the ultimate syndication, right?
And Jason, while you guys obviously need to have some skill as an athlete, a physical athlete, to actually play in your league, the way I see it, and feel free to chime in if that's not correct, but the way I see it too is it democratizes just the ability to be involved on the coaching side of sports in a way that would be nearly impossible for so many kids to get involved with it.
Yeah, that's exactly kind of the way we look at it. And, most everybody that watches professional sports realize I probably don't have the genetic gifts to make it to, the tip-top professional level. And, things like esports, drone racing, things like that, there's a lot more, ability to say, I could do a lot more aspirational, but to say I could do that, but probably a lot of people realize these guys have got neurons that are firing faster and a little more fast twitch and a little better reflexes maybe than I have to make it to that. But everybody in America knows they're smarter than the offensive coordinator of their football team. Everyone knows that for certain, and so this is the chance for them to kind of put that to the test. And one of the other cool things about it is we think that, the way that we present the games, as well as, the control that we give fans over the games, can teach them a lot more about, how football really works. Because there's a lot of complicated stuff happening at very high speed on every play, and then the traditional NFL, from the side broadcast angle is about the worst way to learn what's really going on. The line of scrimmage just looks like a big mess. Receivers run off down the field, you can't see them, and then the ball gets thrown. And, well, how did it get open? What was the coverage? I have no idea. We couldn't really see it. But we were talking about kind of the lucking into the fog game with Tom Brady, when the only camera that worked was the overhead flyer on camera, and fans were seeing that view from kind of behind the quarterback, and they're like, oh, that's really cool. And so now that's kind of become more integrated into a lot of broadcasts. And we think between explaining to fans, this is how all this works, and showing them, what's about to happen, it can really, up their understanding of the game itself, which we think will make it, even more compelling and make them even more excited to keep being involved and learning more.
Democratization of getting people involved. Yeah.
No, I'm really fascinated with what you're doing. I remember, and I do not know the game of the player, but I remember several years back when the first football player, broke open and ran all the way down the field with a few seconds left, and then decided he wasn't going to run into the end zone. He was just going to run back and forth until the time clock ran out. And it was like the first direct correlation to people playing video games being brought into pro sports. And I found that really exciting. And I mean, from everything we're talking about, from kids playing simulators and just like this kind of like dream story. I mean, it was 2 or 3 years ago at this point, a 14-year-old kid won $500,000 in Dubai at a FPV race. And so the idea that we're really just flipping everything on its head in terms of who are our athletes that we're going to be watching and be excited to see play these things is really exciting. And then, like, for what I want to do is really turn FPV into a team sport. And I think something that's really interesting when you look at any sport that people like to watch is it's a cooperative game. I mean, I'm not going to discount racing like NASCAR and IndyCar and stuff like that, but typically when you're looking at e-gaming, you're looking at football, basketball, it's all cooperation based. And so it's a really interesting and exciting time to be involved in FPV because we're getting to create how that cooperation exists. And I don't know where I'm going with this.
Okay. Well, I think a cool way to transition from that would be to talk about Twitch a little bit, because Twitch, it's really fascinating. It's an Amazon-owned social streaming company, and the reason why it's so successful is partially because of esports, but partially also because it's interactive, it enables people all around the world, and it tilts a little bit young to watch all of these new age sports, which was mostly esports, and I'm starting to see traditional sports get on it as well with G League. They just announced a streaming deal. But it seems like a place where all of your sports would be a good fit, and also it would be a way to kind of tap into the perhaps non-traditional sports fan base in a way.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. Our experience during the first season with Twitch was fantastic, and we're going to be on there again. We're excited about integrating even more of our platform and making it an even cooler experience on there. But yeah, it's, you've got, I think you'll evolve into the ability to have a lot of control and almost be your own director and say, okay, this is kind of what I want to see. This is how I want to see the game. And one of the other cool things about the platform is anybody can kind of co-stream your broadcast on their own channel, and so you may have 10 different channels. So somebody could just be doing the Mystery Science Theater 3000, making fun of everything they see on the screen, and people want to watch that. Some people in other countries might, it could be a native Korean language broadcast, keeping up with the action, and fans of Greeks. We had Fans World. It was amazing how many fans worldwide we had, from Australia to Singapore to Europe, and so places where somebody wants to kind of put their own local flavor on it, you can do that through Twitch as well. And just the flexibility that you have to create a unique and customized experience, and let fans decide how they want to consume what you're offering to them is one of the coolest things I think about the idea of streaming video as a whole, and then the things that Twitch can do, and I think the things that Twitch will be able to allow you to do in the near future.
Yeah, the comment stream right alongside the Twitch broadcast, you talked about how the commenters are giving you guys real-time feedback, and I think there's some remarkable stats about young people in particular and where they want to be, and the rise of time spent on Twitch versus traditional broadcast sports that we generally grew up with. I think that one thing that we're doing with Hydra FPV, if you noticed in our video, the cameras that are transmitting from the drones for FPV racing and flying, those are sending an analog video signal. So it looks like old school, right? There's scan lines on it, and there's a reason for that, because old analog video is real-time transmission. And the only way you can fly at those speeds and to get through those obstacles is if you have as close to zero lag as possible. Digital video transmission, the higher quality video that we're accustomed to seeing now, high def, it's milliseconds, but there's too much delay to fly that way. So there's not a ton of FPV. There's simulator stuff, but there's not a ton of it, of the IRL stuff on Twitch, the in real life stuff, coming from this first person view drone flying, because they have to somehow figure out how to convert the analog video they're flying with to digital, to stream it. So that's one of the things we're tackling. That problem may not last forever, but it's very present right now. And so, so we're hoping to see a massive amount of growth of FPV flying, because the other thing Twitch can do is, even if you're just flying yourself, you can build an audience, right? Like, so any kid who can get his hands or her hands on a drone can start flying and doing acrobatic stuff, freestyle stuff, and build an audience. And if they can do it live and get real-time feedback, that's what Twitch provides. And it just opens up a whole new realm of what sports and interaction can be.
I want to touch on that, because I think that there's two aspects that keep Twitch from working in FPV right now. One is that analog, and you're solving that really nicely. The thing that's not being solved is that we're out in the middle of nowhere flying. There's no cell signals, there's no wireless, there's no way to communicate this data. And one thing that's really interesting is you're taking an entire generation and you're turning them into video producers. Because you're literally, I mean, here's a drone right here. Whoops. There's two cameras on this. One is the real-time camera that you were talking about. The other is just a recording device, a GoPro. And so you're taking these kids and they're going out in the middle of nowhere and they're doing crazy stuff like you saw in the video that I was showing a little while ago. And then in order to get that out, they can't do it in real time. So they post-production. They're making these really awesome videos and putting them out. Now, I think what we need to do is pull those kids out of the fields and bring them into our existing arenas and put them in places where we have the infrastructure to show, people who don't know what's going on, what is going on.
Right, so do you think that there is a learning curve to all of your sports, and how are you guys planning to address that? I mean, as a fan. Sorry, as a fan.
I'll just jump in with that. The FPV community is growing immensely, but it's mostly within the people who are participating. It's been very difficult to get fan engagement because of a couple reasons. One, like we talked about, we're in the middle of nowhere, it's hard to stream that, it's hard to show people. The videos are awesome, you see them pop up online, people go crazy about them, and that's really great. But when you actually show up to an event, unless you're doing what Marty's doing, which is a great place to start and engage the fan, is drones themselves are fairly dangerous. You can't just put yourself in the space of a drone that's going 120 miles an hour and weighs 2 pounds and not have some form of separation between you. And so that infrastructure and that stuff is what we have to build up to allow it to be a fan-based experience. And I think that as soon as we can do that, we can start bringing it into this more public space.
But I think, to your point earlier, there's existing stadium structures that, a hockey arena or a baseball stadium with netting that's up or the boards up, so I think you can repurpose existing stadium structures that were built and designed for other sports. And we're starting to see drone racing tours starting to book, events in these places. And then the other side of it is, you talk about, teaching the fans or, what's the onboarding process. If these stadiums also have jumbotrons or large screens. So when we go into bars with the little tiny drones, that's why we can go to the bars. These things only go like 15 miles an hour max, and they weigh like a matter of grams, like 20, 30 grams. So they can fly right into you and it doesn't hurt. So we're producing a really fun novelty right now in these bar races, because you're sitting there drinking your beer and the drone flies right over your head, and it's just sort of like, what is that, And you can look up at the screen, because all bars have TVs and projection screens, and we're showing you what the drone is seeing. So you can kind of try to figure out, oh yeah, that's that drone that just flew by me. Oh, there I am on the screen, because the drone's flying by me. So it's a novelty right now. But in these arenas and in these other sports venues, if there's a video screen, you can provide that same experience. So I think the ability to, not be entirely on the screen like video games are, that just the entirety of it is a video game, and maybe at the end of the day you just feel a little bit empty because it all just happened in a virtual imaginary space. But you can have a similar type experience with real things going on. It's a little bit more fulfilling, And I think the video screen to us is a big, important element as a spectator of understanding more of what you're seeing. Because the drones are just flying, you don't know enough about what the pilots are going through when they're piloting them.
Yeah, and that's why we were talking about how it's kind of a mix of the real world and video games, because it looks like a video game in a lot of ways, but then there's all these components that are in your physical world surrounding you, so it's a combination of both. And with the fan-controlled league, you guys at one point, I believe your CEO, said it was kind of like you're creating American Ninja Warriors. So you guys are creating now your own, previously you were incorporating with an existing indoor league, and now you're creating your own venues to produce these. So how are you're creating your own infrastructure?
Yeah, the original vision when we had gotten the expansion franchise and the IFL, the Indoor Football League, was that we were thinking we were going to turn that into the Interactive Football League. These were all existing franchises. They're franchises like the Iowa Barnstormers that Kurt Warner played for before he made it to the NFL. They've been around for quite some time, but some of the owners liked that idea, some weren't so sure, and we started running on. When we were at home, basically in Salt Lake City, we'd put a decent amount of resources into, the production capacity there and the Wi-Fi and all that. Some of the other arenas weren't quite at that level, and I was in Wichita Falls, Texas, and I was basically on site entering the information on what happened after each play, so that the play calling system would know, okay, now it's 2nd and 3 on the 25-yard line on the far left hash, so these are the plays for that situation. We're going to pick 4 of those to choose from. I was up there doing that, and basically the plays would then, once the fans picked the plays, they'd come down to the coach on his iPad, and he'd relay that in, and then the team would run it. But we were noticing, wait, they're not running the plays that are getting called, and it was because he wasn't getting a signal, because they had no Wi-Fi in the stadium at all of any kind. So I had a Wi-Fi hotspot that I brought with me, so in the second half, I was walking back and forth through the hockey boxes in the stadium so I could stay in range of the coach so that his iPad would pick up the signal so he'd be able to call the plays. So that was when some of the founders had originally come up with, we call it kind of the league in a box concept, where all the teams will be located in the same city and all playing in the same facility that is basically going to be designed as a streaming digital production studio, essentially, with a field on it. I was like, how is this going to, you've got to have that connection, the geographic connection for a team sport, right? Not sold on this. And then that very night, I was in Wichita Falls doing that, and I came back and called the CEO. I was like, yeah, I think you might be onto something here. We need to have the proper infrastructure to make this work. But I think that's going to be something we're really excited about for the broadcast this year, to be able to take it to the next level in a really purpose-built facility that gives you even more control over displaying very, very cool images and having even more control over how you visually tell the story of what's going on.
Interesting. This is just a comment, but I wonder how 5G ultimately will play into that if stadiums start lining their organizers with it. And so another really interesting part of this, I think, with all of tech that's infiltrating sports, is how are younger people able to learn from them. And for example, I'm involved, or I fly a lot at indoor skydiving tunnels, and they have whole teams of STEM students come in and teach them about engineering and all of the components of physics by putting them into a tunnel. Do you guys have any thoughts on how people can look at what you're doing and maybe be inspired, young people, both to kind of go more into STEM from those sports, or to, I lost my train of thought, but go.
STEM, FPV and STEM are completely intertwined, and so from my perspective, my company, we do a lot of projects, and we've been trying to target kids, and I get calls from after-school programs, from high schools, from elementary schools, from middle schools, anybody who's a parent who's trying to teach their kids some kind of STEM-based thing. I'm getting contacted, and they're saying, how can we bring some drones into this program? And so if you break down what FPV is and how you participated in it right now, there's so much you have to do. This is not an out-of-the-box sport. It's not like you go down to your box shop and you buy a package and you come home and you start practicing. And you literally, at this stage, you have to source every part that's going to go into it. You have to put it together, and you know integrally what's going on inside of your system. And it's really exciting because you see these guys out flying. What they're flying, they built, and they know how it works, and they know the intricacies of it. And it goes all the way back to kind of the hot rod days with cars, right, where the guys were building up their engines, they were building their own systems, and so they were out there in their races. They knew how far they could push it, they knew what they can do. And so you can bring kids into this, and you can show them what to do. You can talk to them about endless science and technology and engineering concepts that are wrapped up in this, because this is, I mean, this is what we're doing. We're doing aerospace, we're doing all of these things that all the engineers today are trying to solve these exact same problems, and we're putting it in the hands of kids and we're asking them to solve them before they even get to that stage.
And it's instantly exciting to them. I think, most people that I talk to, when I tell them I'm involved in drone racing, like their eyes light up a little bit, and kids in particular, right? And I'm not a very good FPV pilot, but I brought my little, they're called tiny whoops, the little ones are nicknamed tiny whoops, right, just like that. Brought mine home from the hobby shop. I was crashing it around my basement, and then my 10-year-old daughter put the goggles on, and she was like a natural, right? So kids just pick this up really easily, the simple ones that you can fly out of the box. But yeah, to get into it and to get good at it, you gotta start learning how this stuff works, and it's fascinating. There's an amazing New Yorker article from last month all about this world, and it references South Korea. South Korea has really adopted drone racing and FPV, and it's now a part of the school curriculum. And they're learning drones and FPV and drone racing as part of the curriculum in their STEM education. And I think the pilots there are more advanced from what I was reading in that article. So I'm really fascinated by, and of course it's good for us too if we start getting kids onboarded into this sport, because if we're trying to build the entertainment side of the sport, more people getting a chance to fly is good for the sport, it grows the sport. But the other thing that's interesting to me is that, drones are being used in all manner of industries right now. Some autonomous, but some piloted. And so here's a sport where you can get into it and get into it for the fun of the sport and the competitiveness, but you're building skills that aren't only applicable to the professional level of that sport. You got farmers checking their fields and roofers checking their work and delivery, mechanisms that are now moving to drones. So there's all these possibilities, professional opportunities, for kids that get into this and understand how these things work, the engineering side. So it's a sport with a real marketable potential when you grow up.
Yeah, then there are a couple of aspects of what we're doing that I think really, that kind of speaks to me, what you had said. I mean, there's kind of the obvious, like, hey, I could be a scout. I mean, we had fans, we called it the virtual front office last year, and fans got to be official scouts for the team and helped us find players and, broke down film and things like that. You could say, I want to be a scout, or I want to be a coach, and I'm really learning about the game and being able to do that. But a couple of the other things that I think are interesting and, maybe applicable to an even broader audience, the first is just understanding, wow, this is how you can visually tell stories. Okay, this is how you should try and stitch together, your different camera angles. This is how you could use AI to learn, what an individual viewer likes to see. So if you had an option of 50 different things you could look at every second, how do you pastiche that together into something that's the optimal experience for each person? So I think, the visual storytelling that digital video provides for us is one of those aspects. And then the other is really around, analytics and learning and things of that sort. I always get mad at a lot of the, football as a sport is kind of coming into the whole analytics revolution. It's probably been behind basketball and baseball, and so much of it is because there's only so much you can describe about what happened on the field without understanding what the scheme on offense and defense were. I'll read all these, high-sounding analytics articles and say, well, there's another one that could be written without the X and the O key, because the person who wrote this can, describe something statistically but doesn't know a cover two from boo-hoo. And so I think we're going to have the ability with the player tracking data that we're going to collect to not only have some new ways to analyze and break down and optimize the game and strategies and things of that sort, but also to be able to create new statistics and kind of real-time insights to work into the broadcast. So I think seeing what, analytics and, the ability to play with big data from AI and machine learning standpoint is something else that I think will be really compelling, and we're hoping to see a bunch of our fans, and we're going to try to make this a very open source, open API for all our player data and say, okay, what can y'all come up with? How you're trying to beat them next week, can you do a better job of understanding what this data means than they do to come up with a better strategy for the next game?
In a few minutes, I'm going to throw it over to you guys to ask questions, so start thinking if you have any, and then we'll use the mic right there. But before we do that, really quick, I just want to talk about the idea of whether, and you guys all represent this, but the idea of whether we're going to have completely newly invented sports with video, or is it going to be traditional sports that are just updated in a sense? And I want you guys to comment on that. And before you do, I'm going to just chime in with, I believe you brought it up on our call, the company Modal VR. So this company they are creating a new sport by putting say they're in a soccer field and they put these VR headsets on, and then they're running around competing against each other, but all of a sudden it looks like they're on top of a building in some different universe and throwing things at each other, and it looks incredible, and it's a whole new sport that's combining video with physical. So tell me what you guys think about that, and then we'll throw it over to the audience.
Yeah, as we've been talking about this panel, I don't know if you guys know, you have to submit these panel ideas like last July, right? So it's been a long time coming to figure out what this could be and what the world would be like right now. But it definitely seems like everything's just converging in the middle. We've had real sports and we've had video games. And with video technology becoming much more accessible and small and lightweight, now the traditional sports can enhance, like we've been talking about, like you guys are doing, and enable so much more interactivity and so much more of a fan involvement and dynamic. And then these brand new sports that are not purely computer code, right? Not just on a screen, but can be in the real world and have that added engagement of real life, but still feel a little bit like a video game. So I just see this like merging to the middle. I think all the major sports that we've grown up with are going to start using video in different ways. And they're probably not going to go away. I don't know that these new sports that were born out of the video ubiquity are going to replace all of them, but we just will have more things to choose from, just like esports grew out of nowhere, and now it's a viable thing.
We'll have V-sports to choose from.
Esports. You heard it here first.
We're creating the hashtag right now. But yeah, I think it's going to be some of both. I think that traditional sports will be transformed and enhanced by these capabilities, as well as being able to create entirely new sports or new experiences if you're overlaying a different view on a certain real world action. I think the common thread to me is while not every sport or V-sport application might lend itself to direct fan control of the action itself, I think fans are going to demand control, a much greater degree of control over their experience and how they consume the sport. And so I think that'll be one of the coolest areas in this space, is figuring out the answers on how to tailor the story you're telling to down to the individual fan level, and being able to have the medium to have everybody see whatever game it is, see the game their way.
I think the term V-sport, I think we settled on that term as a collective here because it's very hard to describe what we're doing right now. And it's not augmented reality. I mean, it is. It's not virtual reality, but it is. It's all of these things combined, but it's hard to tell somebody. It's hard to tell somebody that doesn't know what these things are, what they are. And I think collectively, like maybe V-sports is that, maybe that V-sports is that term. Because it's all about that video. It's all about integrating that camera in a new way to play the sports. Now, just to come full circle, I think it's really interesting to see how these things are being applied in football and the sports that you're working on, because I think it changes the fans' perspective on the game. They're not necessarily looking at it like I'm just going to kick back on my couch and drink a beer and watch the game. Maybe they are, but it's completely an interactive thing. They're making a decision, they're watching how it plays out, and then they're analyzing that and trying to figure out how they can improve it. Well, maybe next year we need to redraft our tight end, maybe we need to get a new quarterback, and considering those things. Tied all the way back into FPV and the sports that we're playing, I can't see these things not becoming center stage in the next few years. And I think there's ways of bringing these things to a bigger fan base than exists right now, simply by taking it out of the hobby kind of space that it's in right now. And you're seeing that with DRL, you're seeing it with some bigger players right now. And we're in such the early stages, it's really hard to define the limits of where it's going to go. So I totally see it being center, but I also, there's a thing I want to bring up, is that our friend, was showing this video the other day, of them flying a tiny boat. But what they were doing is they had their 5-year-old who was in karate, and his 5-year-old playing karate was fighting the drone. So they were trying to touch him with the drone. He was karate kicking it and punching it. So there's no reason you can't even see these overlaps between humans and technology interacting in ways we can't even imagine right now, and we're just really trying to forecast and see where that's going to go.
Yeah,
Fight the robots and just
yeah,
talk
there's,
to the robots.
Fight the robots. Yeah, there was one company I read about recently that the drone actually follows them if they're a snowboarder or a runner, and it'll follow them wherever they go automatically, which you can see that learning into training. Does anybody, I want to throw it over to you guys, does anybody have any questions for these guys?
How's it going? My name's Kyle Larry from the University of Connecticut. Jason, this question's for you. What's the role of a coach in a fan-driven sport?
We've thought a lot about that. We had kind of a traditional head coach with the Screaming Eagles last year, and actually 2 games in, we had to let our first coach go for a variety of reasons, and got another coach who did, he did a very fine job. But it's tough. A lot of coaches, they don't want to have decisions dictated by the fans. They don't want to hear these are the players you're going to start, these are the players you want to draft, these are the players you're going to run. And so the way we're looking at it, it's probably going to be something that we're going to experiment with and evolve, but the way that we're looking at it is kind of having one coach on each side of the ball for offense and defense. That's kind of more of what would traditionally be the offensive and defensive coordinator role, because you still need somebody there to explain how everything fits together and get the concepts, make sure the players are doing it well so you've got a high caliber of play. But the fans are essentially going to be the head coach and final decision maker on a lot of those things.
Cool. Thank you.
Yeah, keep going. Thanks.
You mentioned that in South Korea there's been a pretty good progress in terms of adoption of first-person drone flying and other types of esports. What do you think is the reason why they're able to succeed and get mass adoption, and why hasn't that happened in the U.S.? And what can change and make that different here?
Do you have thoughts on that?
I'm just guessing. It's the New Yorker article that was the first time I heard of how developed FPV drones are out over there, and some of the pilots from here are flying over there and racing. Maybe it's just sort of a regional pocket of interest that has tapped into more of the educational potential and the engagement potential from a Spectator Experience, and it's just been kind of pocketed for some reason. But I know that DRL is certainly trying to figure it out here, and putting it on ESPN is a major step of sort of like legitimizing the sport. And I think the potential for this, there's a collegiate drone racing championship. It was at Purdue last year. So we've been approached by colleges around our area who put together some drone racing teams. So I think we're going to start to see it take on the shape of some of these other sports that we're more familiar with. I wish I had a better answer for you. I don't know much about the South Korean experience.
It reminds me a little bit of the adoption of esports in a sense, and obviously in Asia, esports, that's where it initially took off, and then we are seeing it becoming more popular now. We're seeing colleges have even recruitment and scholarships for esports players. So I think it's going to be important to have the universities here start to have programs that support this, and then maybe you'll see it slowly start to be more adopted here.
Can I add something to it? I don't know if this is the case or not, but in the U.S. at least, there's been, at least for drones, there's been a fear of drones and what they are, and there's been this connotation that they're either military drones dropping bomb on people, or they're these spy drones looking in your back window. And I think that more recently we're seeing some changes in that perception in the community, that that's not really what drones are. And I think, culturally, I think maybe that's not the same perspective that there was in Korea. I don't think they looked at it the same way, but that's, like Marty said, it's just my guess.
Yeah, and I'm completely guessing here too, but there might be less of a cultural barrier to accepting, something like that as a sport. When esports started first being carried on ESPN, you'd have the typical, AM radio call in, oh, that's not a sport. I'm here to watch sports. I don't want to watch a bunch of nerds playing video games, and, probably looked at drone racing the same way. So there were a lot of people that probably never, tuned in, and then they start tuning in and watching, like, wow, this is actually really cool. But there might be less of a, if you'd call it just traditionalist mindset on what is and isn't a sport, and what is and isn't, what can and can't be a compelling experience to watch.
But I'll say, as a non-gamer, it's hard to watch Twitch for the first time or E-League on Turner if you don't know the game. And so, but it's also hard, I think, the first time you watch football. If you've never played football, right? You have to learn to be a spectator. We touched on that a little bit earlier. So I think we are still figuring the spectator experience out, certainly in the FPV world. You guys are exploring how a spectator can get more active. I do want to mention, if you guys are here through the weekend, we're actually doing one of our bar drone races tomorrow night at a place called Little Woodrow's. It's the South Park Meadow. We've got some postcards here, but it's going to be from 6 to 10 tomorrow night, and it's going to be just like what we're doing in Minnesota. These little tiny wood drones flying around your head that you can see what's happening on the screen, and it's fun. It's a novelty, and we're figuring out how to make it really exciting as well. So I wanted to make sure I mentioned that.
And this is just a crazy thought from somebody who's seen the drone racing league. When they're actually in these races, they're not going 15 miles per hour. They're going like 80 miles per hour. And you see the guys, because it's like they're miniature versions of themselves on top of the drone, and you'll see them kind of duck around these objects. It's crazy. And then the spectators too. I mean, if they're really into it, they're going to be involved with it too. So just as people slowly get used to it. We have about time for one more question. If anybody else has one, if you want to stand up. Cool. Oh, one more. Okay.
I was a little late, so apologies if you touched on this already, but Marty and Jason kind of touched on it a little bit there when you were talking about ESPN. How do you think, in terms of distribution, how does it stack up between traditional broadcasters, social platforms, and then the OTT direct-to-consumer offerings as well?
I do think that anything that's getting off the ground right now, starting right now, I guess that was a pun, the most immediate accessible form of doing that is on the streaming platforms online, and that's where the young people are. And so I think DRL is tackling this in an interesting way to try to legitimize it, and putting a high production value to make the sport look real and legitimate, and having sort of very aggressive commentators talking about it like it's a very aggressive sport. We've done it a little bit differently, but we're live streaming, and we can have a little bit more fun with it. We've got kind of more of a humor guy that does our race calls, but I think the new audience is on the more social platforms. They appreciate the interaction. There's no gatekeeper to going there. We can just put it up there and see who salutes. So, in my opinion, that's the way this will start. It's more of a ground-up approach to growing something new. We just got kind of the endorsement of ESPN putting it on their air as well, but I think we just want to find all the more community-based flyers and give them a chance to be seen and do that more easily on the streaming platforms.
Great, guys. Well, time is up. Thanks, and maybe we'll see you guys on Saturday night.